This thing is the SilverStone Milo 12, and yes, this thing does look like the most Office-like PC you can imagine. Yes, my local government probably writes my traffic tickets on something that looks like this, but this thing is really cool, trust me. Before you guess my sanity, I am aware how this thing looks, but so far I have not seen an Office PC type case as overpowered as this one. I didn't say yes to this because I got a brain hemorrhage the moment I got the mail. No, I said yes to this because you can utilize this thing to create one of the most sleeper looking like PCs possible. This thing looks like a DELL optiplex, but it's better. Standing like that, it's obviously not quite the small form factor case. It's still small, sure, but it's also quite tall. I would say like that middle-sized DELL optiplex. What a gorgeous looking PC. After a good eye rinsing with some isopropyl, let's get to that Milo case. Standing on the table, that thing is 393mm high, 378 deep and 105 wide. Don't click away of this video, this thing is cool. By default, the case comes bare bones, but using the included goodies, we can take the feet and create an X shape to lift it off the table for a few millimeters. Not necessary, but a cool option. Alternatively, you can also use these glue-on mini rubber feet, either to let the Milo stand or lie flat on the table. And before anybody asks, please do not put a monitor on that thing. Yes, it is sturdy, it really is, but it's not 1998 anymore. Please don't do that. Every side of the case can be removed off the main chassis. Simply remove all the screws in the back of the case and then pull the panel out, including the bottom one. And we can already see why I believe this thing is cool. One of the main features of the Milo 12 is that it has two completely separated compartments where both are using a separate air in and out path. Every, and I mean every side of the case has a relatively big hole mesh structure to it. Additionally, the two sides, so the parts where air is meant to go into the case, those two sides have an additional permanently attached dust filter behind them. The top and the bottom, on the other hand, those are the parts where the air is supposed to go out, or at least the top one, and there isn't any filter on there, which does make sense so that the air can move out freely without any restrictions. On one side of the case, and I'm saying one as in you can still reverse the case and in that moment the one side becomes the other side, but one side of the case is meant to house the PSU and motherboard. Given the size and orientation, we are talking about a 180 reverse mini ITX motherboard only. So the single PCIe slot will be looking towards the other compartment. Right in front of it is the PSU. For this one, we will find the first kinda cool thing. This is not only SFX and SFXL sized, but by removing that pre-installed bracket, we can also install a fully sized ADX power supply in here. Now you will start hitting the top part of that compartment at about 185mm. So taking cables into account, I wouldn't go above, let's say 165mm long blocks. But given what this case is about and the fact that there are many very good SFX PSUs out there, I would still opt for an SFX or SFXL one and just call it a day. Even just SFX. We have that SilverStone one in here and that works perfectly fine, 850 watts. What more do you need? To connect the PSU to power, we got that extension cord in the bottom, which is coming out in the back of the case. But let's get back to the motherboard, and by the way, good job SilverStone for leaving such a huge hole for the backplate. Great for people like me who constantly install the motherboard before attaching the cooler because we just forget. Anyway, in front of it, we got about 77mm worth of CPU cooler before we start hitting the front panel. So Nokia NHL9s, Be Quiet LP, SilverStone's own Hydrogon H90, all the SFF or Ultra SFF type of coolers will work just fine. However, you can also get away with something like a Nokia L12S, if the fan is installed below the heatsink at least. Speaking of the fan, one of the biggest differences between something like a DELL Optiplex and this thing is that fully meshed side panels. Whatever you get will be able to breathe air right from above. potentially even enhanced by using something like Nokia styrofoam airpath thingies, which I just don't know the name right now. Probably NA something. But let's get away from that whole CPU topic for a minute and concentrate on the GPU, because in contrast to Dell's beautiful gaming machinery, in here we have something that actually lets you use a real GPU. On the other side of the case, we got this whole area dedicated for your $2,000 Minecraft decoder. And at 355mm maximum length and 3 full slots, we can get some really beefy cards in here. Not everything. My 4090 Trinity is 3.5 slots wide, so there is no way in hell that will go in here. But you can get some really big cards. And there is the 4090 Founders Edition or smaller RTX 4000 AIB cards that will still fit in here. So 355 is a lot. For the maximum depth, it's usually an issue, and in here we are looking at 165mm, so keep that in mind if you need to use one of these NVIDIA octopuses. Octopi. But how will we connect the GPU if it's completely separate from everything else? Well, that's why SilverStone includes this very tiny, very little PCIe riser. And yes, it's a Gen 4 riser, but show me the person who will distinguish a game played on a 4090 in Gen 4 mode versus Gen 5. And I'm going to give him a medal. Don't kid yourself, you won't see the difference. Similarly to the CPU, the GPU can take its air right through the ventilated side panel. And thanks to the top having no dust filter at all, natural air convection can do its thing. But there's something else. On the right half of the GPU compartment, we got this weird looking plastic thing, and this one is actually really cool. We can use this to clamp the GPU in, either to protect it from bending downwards or ripping itself out of the riser, or it can clamp the GPU and protect it from the regular sag issue in case you have the PC lying flat on the table, which is pretty neat. But now let's get to the fans, because yes, there are fans. On paper, there are two spots. One is right in front of the GPU. This is a 80mm fan hole at max 15mm thickness. The 50mm might be slightly underrated. I believe you can get away with about 20 before you start hitting the GPU compartment, but it's 80mm nonetheless, which is already a very special form factor. But let's be honest, you don't really need that fan. Given from where and to where the GPU is blowing air, it's not like that thing will do anything meaningful. Then there is a 140mm fan mount, which it took me a while to realize that it's there or where it actually is. And it's all about the GPU. First off, there is another smart design decision SilverStone has done inside of this thing. By leaving open this portion of the GPU compartment, the newer RTX cards, which all have that fan that blows air right through the heatsink, can use that space to get the hot air straight out of the case on the other side of it. That's very different from a regular case where the hot air just gets blasted into the CPU cooler, leading to a higher overall temperature. But in case that wasn't enough, or in case that your GPU has an open back design without a fan in there, which also exists, you can use these 4 holes to install a 140mm fan that pulls air through the GPU and pushes it out on the other side, quite far away from the CPU cooler. How cool is that? That can improve cooling by so much. With all of the cool stuff covered, let's now tackle the stuff that I hate, personally. 2.5-inch SSDs. In total, we can install up to 4 SSDs in here. 2 above the motherboard, 1 below it, and the last 2.5-inch spot is hidden behind this front panel. Kinda unfortunate for the real OG Office users, but I feel like SilverStone could have added the holes for another 3.5-inch drive where that 140mm fan is supposed to go. Or use the 2.5-inch brackets next to it as a combined 2.5 or 1 3.5-inch. That would have worked size-wise, and it would have been nice to give people the option to hurt themselves. But now we have a last feature, and I hate it. If you're using an SFX PSU, meaning the bracket in the bottom stays, it will give you some free space behind it. If you've done that, you can clip out this odd looking piece, providing you with a 9.5mm slim optical drive slot. Oh, this just keeps coming back. No, jokes aside, this is needed. I refuse to get one of those just for the B-roll shots, just because of my sheer hatred for the technology and the nightmares from my childhood. But this is still an Office PC, and there are more than enough reasons for an Office PC to have an optical drive. So, although I hate the technology, this is very necessary. In the corporate world, many things are still done using CDs. One example that I know of would be medical scans. They are done far away from the doctor's office, in some building where they have the scanner, and then they will burn the results on said CD, and then you take the CD to your doctor. Hence, the optical drive there is necessary. I might hate the technology, or I might be happy that my cases that I use personally don't have them anymore, but I get it. I get why people need them, and in a case looking like this, for the use case that this is intended to, perfectly fine and great feature. As a last quick note, the front panel has two USB 3.0 Type A's, one USB Type C, and a combined audio in and out. And in case you are wondering where that power button is, because I had to search for it for way too long, it's this corner. And whatever the thing next to it is the reset button apparently. So where do we stand? It's an Office case on freaking steroids. This is what Dell, HP or whoever are not willing to go for, resulting in arguably cheap but also very badly cooling devices. This, on the flip side, is thought through. The CPU can breathe freely, fresh air, not being distracted by any hot air whatsoever coming from the GPU. The GPU can breathe freely, even allowing the hot air to escape in the top, like in a well-planned case, or in a well-planned way. And we got ATX support for the PSU and 4 SSDs and an optical drive. So given that you are planning your build well, like not pairing a 3900K with a 70mm high cooler, for example, as long as you stay in the range of this makes sense, you can build one heck of a PC inside of this thing. The system we got in here is a B650 ASRock motherboard paired with a 7600X and Silverstone's own Hydrogon H90 cooler. Now, the chip will thermal throttle slightly if I hit it with a loop of Cinebench, but in gaming, it runs fine. It's hitting 5.1, 5.2 GHz all core during gaming, so I'm really happy with how this thing performed. The GPU, on the other hand, was 76 degrees C or something in firmware 1080p, so it's breathing almost freely. The performance is fine. So yeah, this thing is a Dell Optiplex on steroids. I'm not going to lie, it looks horrible. Next to whatever case I will pull out of the shelf, this thing will lose every competition. But, and that's really important, despite my lack of appreciation for the Office style, you can't put an O11 dynamic with a glowing RG poop cooler next to a monitor and expect the people that show up for their appointment with the doctor to not think about the many things that are wrong with you. That just doesn't work. Hence the Office style. It's simple, it doesn't draw any attention, but on the inside you can still have a gaming beast, but hidden inside the most Office looking case I have ever reviewed. But it still looks horrible. I mean, I may be exaggerating a bit. It doesn't look so bad, it's for the jokes. For an Office PC, this thing looks incredibly good. But for an Office PC, for like the average O11, it's a different story. Another aspect that I really wanted to appreciate here is the build quality. From the 4 panels to the interior structure, this thing is really freaking sturdy. I guess the size and the fact that all like the reinforcements are very close to each other makes it so sturdy, but nothing freaking flexes. Not even like the motherboard compartment or the back panel that separates the two compartments. Nothing flexes. This is some high quality build, really suitable for like a decade-long usage in an office. So if you are about to build a really good PC, and if it is necessary that that thing does not draw any attention whatsoever, but it still needs to perform like a freaking champ, and it will sit right next to a monitor without taking too much space, well, this thing is definitely an alternative option to all of the pre-built DELL optiplexes and whatever they are called nowadays. This is the weirdest case I have covered so far, and I didn't think I would ever get to a point like this. But okay, for today, this is going to be it for SilverStone and their Milo 12. On a side note, we also have a Discord server, so if you want to join, the link is down below. And of course, we still have channel memberships, so if you're looking for a good way to sell your soul for an OG poop emoji, that's a pretty good way to go. Additionally, you can rest assured that the income will not only keep the channel afloat, but will also serve to pay for the therapist that I now need because I made the huge mistake of Googling and I found out that the design of the Milo 12 is actually an improvement of what the Milo 11 looked like. Oh my god. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you want to continue, have a look at our take on the SilverStone Hydrogon H90 that we used in this build. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.